Hi and welcome to this week's episode of the Guestlist Podcast. I am Steve Guest, your host, and looking forward to chatting to today's guest as we move through the podcast. A quick reminder for any of you that haven't perhaps listened to an episode before. This podcast was set up over a year ago now off the back of lots of questions, lots of emails, lots of contact that was being made off the back of my top biller book, The Life of a Recruiter. And I felt I couldn't answer all the questions, couldn't get back to every one of you. So created a podcast where I could invite far more intelligent, far more interesting people to have a chat with that could answer the questions far better than I could. And hence the Guestlist Podcast was born. Today's guest is no different to that. And I'm really looking forward to having a chat with her. I'm going to jump straight into the bio so we can get started. Today's guest is founder and coach of Retrained Search. She's worked on the front line in recruitment for the last 20 years, having been a contingent recruiter before transitioning to Retained. Today's guest understands the struggles that recruiters face operating on a contingent basis. Her mission is to help recruiters to transition to Retained and secure more forecastable revenue. Louise Archer, welcome to the Guestlist Podcast.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
That is one statement and a half, isn't it? Because I would imagine most of the listeners to this podcast from a recruitment background will be contingent.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe it sounds daunting or bold, and I suppose it would have done to me many years ago. I didn't even think that it was going to be possible to work on a retained basis. It wasn't a world that I thought I would ever inhabit. No, I didn't think I'd get anywhere near it, really. I really didn't. I didn't know that it was possible. And that is one of the main reasons that I do what I do, because I've done it myself, and now I've helped so many people to do the same, that it's become a bit of a calling to change that misconception that it's really difficult, or it's not possible, or it won't work for me, or it won't work in my market, and all those kind of things that people tend to think.
Well, I'm probably sat in that corner, and we had a chat last week, didn't we? And I've been a contingent recruiter for 17 years, and I sit there thinking, well, Retained won't work in construction. It won't work with the clients I've got. It won't work with the contractors I deal with. I see certain elements where I can understand it working perhaps at a senior level, at a director level, or a more specific, perhaps headhunting level. But actually, it could work across the board. It's perhaps an education piece for clients more so than anything. Do you think that's probably a fair assumption or assessment?
Yeah, I do. I think it's easy to think that it is only for senior executive appointments and only suitable for the professional services industries, financial services and law and so on. But having worked in construction, infrastructure, energy engineering myself, I know that isn't the case, and that the industry is not the determining factor that means that it will or won't work, or that clients will or won't be receptive to it. And actually, the determining factor is whether the contingent model is working for them or not. If it is, and they're getting what they want when they want it, and it's an enjoyable process, there's very little reason for them to do anything different. And why should they? But for lots of different reasons, in those industries, as well as in professional services industries and others, many hiring firms aren't getting what they want when they want it, or it isn't a particularly enjoyable process, or sometimes both. Mm-hmm. And therefore, there's an opportunity for us to show them that there's a different way. Yep. That it doesn't have to be like that they can do it differently.
And it is on us as recruiters, isn't it? Because quite often I think this is what we do, this is what we're experts in. And if we're not offering alternative solutions and opportunities to enhance the service or add value, then we're only doing half the service, aren't we?
Well, quite. I gave somebody the example the other day. Imagine you had a supplier. In search, many consultants outsource parts of the process, outsource some of the research. Imagine you had a research firm working for you, and for the last 10 years, they'd done the same thing, provided the same service, and at no point come to you and said, we're adapting the ways that we work, and we now offer several different ways of doing things. Would you be surprised or offended or annoyed if they did come to you and say, actually, markets change and markets move, and we're adapting the way we work? We're almost doing them a disservice by not making sure that we're giving them the opportunity to work in the most effective way given the circumstance.
Yeah. So let's take it back. So you've been in recruitment 20 years.
Mm.
When you first got to be a recruiter, what did you do? What markets were you working in? How did it all work?
Long time ago, I joined a firm in Sale near Manchester, just South Manchester, that my mum owned, actually. It's her fault. And I was a candidate controller. That was my official title. Yeah. And that involved finding mainly secretaries and admin and warehouse workers for a team of very fiery consultants. And it was fun. It was really good fun. It was, I was talking about it the other day, actually. I gave an example of my typical day. It was the consultants whinging because nobody wanted to go to work. That was our main problem. It was temp work as well. It wasn't, most of it was temp rather than perm. Nobody wants to go to bloody work. We've got these jobs and there are loads of unemployed. Why can't you? And they're all in the pubs and they're all whinging. So I got up and I went out. I printed out downstairs in the admin office a load of little leaflets just saying, come and earn, £4 an hour or whatever it was. Mm. I went around all the pubs in Sale, and suddenly they started walking. I said, come on, you can come in and you come in now. We can send you there this afternoon. They started walking in the door, and the consultants were like, where are all these people coming from? I said, well, you said they were in the pub, so I went and got them, So yeah, that was my first forays into recruitment. I never really left since. I've kind of done other things and tried to leave actually several times. And I know that if I hadn't have transitioned to Retrained when I did, I would have almost certainly left the industry. I was that fed up with it.
And what do you think got to the point of being fed up? Was it working on a contingency basis?
Yeah, definitely.
So what?
Absolutely, definitely. I was so back 20 years ago, I was actually, was it 13 years in by then, 14 years in by then, I'd got quite good at it, as you do. Mm-hmm. You're very, very good at it. And it takes time to build those skills of all the sourcing and the engaging and the talking to candidates in such a way that they open up and they're honest with you, and doing the same with clients. It takes maturity, and you mature into that. And when you get very, very good at it, you know that given the time and given the commitment from your client and given the opportunity to do the job properly, that you can do it. That if it's possible to do, you'll be able to do it. If anyone can do it, then you can. And that's where I'd got to. But what was frustrating was I was working with them on a no-win, no-fee basis, and often where it was sometimes very difficult to not have other suppliers involved. And even where there was exclusivity, if something landed on their desk left of field, they were saying, what can I do? I've got to take it. And you empathize with that, but it meant that you constantly having to balance. I was constantly having to juggle what I was doing, because there was always that risk. And that precluded me from doing the job that I really wanted to do. Yeah. So that's where I'd got to. That was just driving me. It was driving me mad, working on stuff that then ultimately ended up and being rushed through things as well, having to rush candidates through, or having to not being able to do the job that I really wanted to do. Basically, that's where I got to.
They are genuine struggles, aren't they? I'm 17 years in of managing and recruiting the same desk in the same geographical area for the same people. the graduates I placed 17 years ago are my clients now.
Wow.
And it's brilliant, but still has all the same frustrations in that at the moment we're in a very candidate-led market, as we are in most sectors, most markets. And working on a contingent basis, I love the cut and thrust. I love the kind of kick up the backside that it gives you when you get a vacancy you know you can fill, or you get a candidate apply and you think, I know I can put them straight away. And it's that I suppose that fight and that speed and efficiency that gets you that person the new role that they're looking for. And I suppose the motivation of you don't get paid until you're successful really pushes me on. It ticks a box in my head to say, you need to go and get this done. And it makes me do more and more. And I think from a retained base, whether I've convinced myself this over time, which I probably have, and it's massively inaccurate, and I get it, but I'm going to say it out loud anyway, because I'm sure there'll be people that are listening that say the same. I'm nervous that if I go onto a retained piece of recruitment, that my motivation may drop. I've said it out loud. It sounds really strange, because I think that I know you can set it up so you can get paid at various stages of the process for the parts that you fulfill, the shortlist, the interview, the successful placement. It makes me nervous that it's just a different way round of doing it. I'm quite borderline OCD, so I don't like change anyway. So I think the mere idea of changing my setup is probably the bigger factor. Am I making sense here in terms of...
Absolute sense, yeah. Yeah, I completely understand.
What would you say to that in terms of where do you find the energy to go and get the placement if you've received the cash?
My experience of that is that it's actually exactly the opposite.
Okay.
It's exactly the opposite. That actually what happens is the thrill and the cut and thrust and the adrenaline rush, it happens twice.
Okay.
In a retained search process. The first time is when you win the project.
Yeah.
Because you've won at that point. There's a lump sum being paid to you, but also you've successfully managed to convince them that this is the right way to go.
Yeah.
But then the commitment that you're making to your client is to execute on that search.
Yeah.
If you execute it well enough, then it should result in a hire. But you're not in complete control of that, of course. The client takes some responsibility for that as well, which is one of the main reasons the payment is spread.
Yeah.
The shortlist fees are always nice to get. Yeah, don't get me wrong. But the real win comes when you complete on a retained assignment, because not only have you won it and executed well against it, but you've delivered it beautifully. And if you don't do that, inversely, you failed.
Yeah.
And so I found that it's the opposite, and that actually when you win a retained assignment, come hell or high water, your absolute mission is to deliver against it.
Of course.
Not for 1 minute do you think, oh well, I've got a third of that in the bank, so I think I'll just put my feet up and not do anything. Yeah. The minute that the money lands, you're like, right, okay, now I've got to make this happen. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that at all.
No, it's just strange how your mind works, isn't it? And I think you almost create your own hurdles because it's perhaps something a little bit different. I mean, in terms of making that step move, let's say lots of the people listening today are from a contingent background. What would you say are the first perhaps transitional steps or thought processes that you can perhaps take to look at a different avenue, look at a retained service as part of the overall package that you potentially would deliver on?
So, as I was alluding to before, the starting point is to establish if there's a need for retained solutions in your market. Retained solutions, as I keep describing them, are just that. Whether it's a single search mandate, whether it's a multi-hire campaign, whether it's a piece of market intelligence or insight that you're collecting, they all, for me, come into the same category as retained solutions, in that the client is making a financial commitment, and in return you're committing to execute that project. But they are solutions, and they're solutions that are only necessary if there's a problem, or if there's a challenge to be solved. So the first step is to look at your client base and review, and sometimes that involves the research around it, to talking to clients and finding out, is the way that they're operating at the moment, well, how are most agencies operating at the moment? You're saying that most of these are likely to be working on a contingent basis. Is that model working for them? Are they getting what they want? Are they getting it when they want it? Is it an enjoyable process? Is it effective, that way of working? And if it is, and it's solving their talent acquisition challenges across the board, from single pieces of work to more than one, to do they have the insights that they need? Do they have the data that they need? I know I'm going into kind of more complex territory, but once you realize the theory, it can be applied to any piece of any project or work in this arena. If they aren't getting, or there are gaps in what they're getting, then there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to bring to your client a different way of working, either to solve the challenges that the contingent model isn't solving, or to solve challenges that we don't currently get visibility of, because we're contingent recruiters and only operating in that providing CVs space. And that would be my first tip.
You picked on something there where you said about picking up on an opportunity and offering a solution. Is that where Retrained has come from in terms of your journey?
Yeah, I suppose so. It's happened completely by accident. There's no way in this world that if you said to me, God, even 5 years ago, that this is what I'd be doing, I would have laughed you out of the room. And training, I probably had quite a poor experience of trainers in my recruitment career. Not because they're not lovely people and wanting to give help and support, but I haven't ever looked at a trainer and thought, wow, I want to be able to do what you can do. It just hasn't really been that inspirational for me, my training journey in recruitment. And most of the people that I've learned the most from is just colleagues that I'm sitting next to, or people that you go out and meet clients with and think, oh, that's good, I'm having that, so yeah, no, I didn't set out to be a trainer, and my journey's happened, probably in the same way that you just described, in that I learned how to transition to retain thanks to a guy I used to work with, Matt Howler. Always credit him with that first step for me, who was brilliant and still is brilliant. And the business I was working with at the time, Air Swift, who gave me a great opportunity to teach people internally how to do the same. And that was where I started to build the ability and the desire to want to help other people to do it. And then it's just grown arms and legs really since then, and it's become a bit of a calling. And although I do the odd piece of search work now for friends, that's about it. It's mainly helping people and their mission. That was going to be my next
question. Do you still get involved, or is it very much from a trainer coach perspective now?
I'm heavily involved with other people's projects and their work in the field, so I'm bang up to date with what what's happening out there and the challenges and how to overcome them. But the only pieces I do now are for friends. The last piece I did was some telesales staff, actually. Telesales, very low level, 25k telesales staff for a friend in Salford Keys in financial services. So all sorts, but only for friends.
And talk to me about the growth of Retrained. How has that gone? How long has it been going? What's happened?
So I was delivering the training and teaching people how to transition to retained in the field originally, just because people had asked me to come and help them. And when the first lockdown happened, it meant that I couldn't get on the plane and go and deliver it to a team in the US. It got quite popular. I was struggling to get round everybody anyway, and starting to think I need to figure out a way of kind of, bottling this or making it more accessible so that people can access it. And somebody had mentioned video to me, and I thought, well, that's a good idea. And the lockdown just catalyzed that for me, not being able to go and deliver it. I didn't have a lot else to do. So my brother was kind enough to invest, and he was kind enough to lend me enough to build the video training program. And so I set about over about 3 to 6 months it took to get it all down. And then Claire and Ben Brevitt, who I'd luckily met on a client site in Birmingham. Ben, who is a very talented videographer, and Claire now works for us and organises all of us. And they helped me put it into a video program. So it's now held in a video program. That was, what were we, 2 years since the first lockdown now? Blimey. That was 2 years ago, yeah.
What's crazy about that story, and we didn't know each other at the time, and this is your podcast episode, not mine, but we were going through the same process. So I built the 12-week recruitment mastery program in lockdown, doing videos and creating content on my own, sat in an office locked away while my wife homeschooled. And you were sat doing exactly the same, not knowing at this point, 2 years on, we'd be talking to each other, talking about the lockdown stories.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? And look how far you've come now.
But do you know what's great about it? And the bit that I love is, I think when times of troubles, time of trouble, and things perhaps aren't particularly great, which they weren't, I love listening to the stories where people thought, you know what, I'm going to make something of this. This time, this moment where it was unheard of. You're in lockdown. What else do you do? Do you stick or twist? Do you go and sit in the garden and have a mojito or something? Or do you just get your head down and create something? And I love that. I think it's brilliant. And say, look where you are now.
I'm with you. I'm a bit of a productivity geek. I like being productive. I'm not a fan of dead time. But then I did hear on the radio the other day, the guy who's written that 4,000 Weeks book about the opportunity cost of being productive and what you miss out on by not slowing down a bit. So I probably should. I had a few mojitos in the garden as well. Don't get me wrong, Steve.
It's all about balance, isn't it? I think it's really difficult. When I always kind of quote myself as living 100 miles an hour, and I know that's kind of dangerous in certain parts. But if it's who you are, it's who you are. And you've got to, remind yourself sometimes to slow down, and get a bit of fresh air, go for a walk.
True. One of the people that have been has been so immensely influential in my life, and was part of my journey right at the beginning, is my mum. She encouraged me to take that first step, and has been encouraging me ever since. And she was a real driving force at that stage, where she said, and she was so right looking back, if you don't do this now, if you don't put it into video now, you never will.
No.
You'll be so busy. As soon as the world opens back up again, you'll be back at where you were, constantly being bombarded with people wanting you to go and deliver it, and you'll never stop and actually have the time. And now looking back at how long it took, and how you having done it yourself, you'll know how hard it is.
It's not easy.
Condensing and distilling everything into a really easy to digest format with all the the materials that they need and the things that they need to do every step of the way. It's a lot of work, and if I'd known how much work it was going to be, I don't know whether I would have done it, but I'm so glad I did.
It's very true. I'm having kind of memory flashbacks as you're talking. I'm thinking, like, because it was lovely weather as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Our two boys were playing in the paddling pool at home in the back garden, and like, you should be at home taking this time spending it with the family. And I get it. I kind of missed out on that element to create what we've ended up with, which is great, and it now provides for.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
And so you kind of started on one of my questions there, where I think we all like to have influential people around us, people that really support, and they're the individuals that you go to when you're perhaps having a down day or you need some inspiration. Your mom obviously being top of the list. Who else would you say that this can be literary, it can be YouTube videos, it could be around you?
I mean, my mum is she's my business counsel and my rock and my advisor and my pick me up when I'm down and pull me down if I'm getting too carried away with something.
Oh, yeah.
And everything really. Matt Howell is another, the guy I used to work with that put me on this journey to Retrained in the first place. He runs his own search business now, and is, if I'm stuck on anything technical, he's often one that I'll go to. I do a lot with Mitch Sullivan. I love Mitch's outlook on life. I love bouncing things around with him. And we're getting together more and more face to face. Yeah, and it's just got such a nice, straightforward way, and I really like that. What we do as part of the community is the people who join and do the program that then get really good at Retrained become advisors in the community, and they come and do sessions for us. And there are several people through our community that have now become, and they teach me as much as I've taught them. You know, people like Debbie McDonald over in Australia, who incidentally is in construction, so no more excuses. And there's several in the UK as well. John Guest is one of them. And David Etherington, for me, he's now CEO of Amoria Bond, is just my hero, really, in many ways. He's so good. He's so knowledgeable. He's been through everything from a Retained perspective. There's nothing about Retained work that he hasn't encountered. And so if I'm stuck on anything, then him and Matt tend to be the ones that I go to.
Yeah. Sorry, we'll cut that bit out, I'm sure. Okay, so during the whole journey in the process, has there been a time, a moment, or perhaps even a period where everything's gone wrong or it's failed and you're sat there thinking, am I doing the right thing? Or has actually that moment been the catalyst that sent you down a different direction?
I think at many stages in my career, I've had, I've faltered. Yeah, I think many times. Yeah. But do you mean specifically with the Retrained business or my journey to Retained?
Not really. I think we all have perhaps pivotal moments, don't we, where we're heading down a route, something happens or something changes, or from a business perspective, you've tried something and it just didn't work, and you think, do you know what, that's it, I'm going to go off this direction.
I don't know that. Well, yeah.
Maybe it's just being fed up of contingent models.
I think, yeah. I mean, the biggest change for me has been changing from contingent to Retained, but I think that there were several things that contributed. There were several things that contributed to that. I had a bit of a breakdown in my early 20s in a recruitment job.
Yeah.
It was a contingent recruitment perm in professional services, and it was high pressure. But the problem with me, especially at that age, was nobody put more pressure on me than me. And
often the biggest pressure, though, isn't it?
And the leader that we were being led by at the time was fantastic and very, very good and very strong leader, but was also putting pressure on. And through nobody's faults, people can take pressure in different ways and what somebody else can handle. But because I was piling on such immense pressure on myself, that combined with, I think I'd done a lot of learning, put it that way, in all walks of life leading up to that event, and it compounded that pressure. And looking back, the contingent model definitely didn't help. It definitely didn't help. It was constantly what's going on the board next month, what's going on the board this month, where's it going to come from, what is it, how much is it going to be? And of course, it's so bloody difficult to know.
Yeah.
It's so hard to know, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when somebody's putting immense amounts of pressure on you to know, you can only do so much to control it. So that had, I think, when ultimately I was then given the opportunity or saw a glimpse of retained work, that made so much sense to me to solve the problems that I was having, that I was falling out of love with my work, and that would have been a real shame. So that was massively, all those things combined, I think.
I think thinking along things like that, the Retrained stabilises the process, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From the way my thought process works, and not only do you not know the numbers necessarily, but they can change in a conversation.
It's just the smallest thing can happen, and then what you thought was going to happen is not going to happen, and the impact of that when you've got a young family, particularly, well, for any stage in your life, but when other people are depending on you, it can be inversely it can. Somebody described it, and I think it was probably Mitch, actually, as you grow up, then that's when people tend to often start to gravitate towards a model that is more sustainable. When you haven't got the dependence of young family, hoping that it works out is okay, isn't it? Because what does it mean? Either I've got a bit of bonus to be able to go on holiday with, or I haven't. It's no drama. But when you're building a life and you're investing in a future for your family, or sending your children to school, or buying your home, then you might need something a bit more dependable than that. But it definitely doesn't decrease your motivation for doing your job. No, I've had no experience of that.
I don't think that would ever be the case. I think certainly for me, whether it came across as that, it's the change. I think it's the
it's difficult though when you've been doing something, and lots of people that come to me, even in just the initial talks with them, just to find out whether it's what we do is suitable for them. That is many people's biggest fear. It is, can I change from something that I've been doing for a long time? And there's another misconception, and that is that you have to go all retained. You can either work contingent or you work retained. There's no kind of middle ground, and that can make it feel like a huge step. But in my experience, that isn't the case. You don't need to take that step and then not look back. There are middle steps in between. And at any point you can kind of turn around and go back the other way, or revert back to what you were doing, and no harm done. It's not something that you have to. It's not a one-way street.
We create these things, don't we, in our head, that I don't know whether it's a self-preservation thing, but I think sometimes it stops us in our tracks, when actually just having a bit more of an open mind, with the ability to just kind of know that you could do one or the other.
It is. And I think if we go back to what we were talking about earlier, and that is, rather than looking at it as a change for you and a model or a way of working that you need to change to, if instead you look at it as a solution to some of the challenges that your client is facing, then it becomes, if they're not having those challenges, it's not necessary. But if they are having those challenges, then it's a way of tackling those in a more robust and thorough and systematic and committed partnership.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't come back from that, or it doesn't mean that you can't work with them on a contingent basis, because it isn't always necessary to apply that kind of process. And that starts to make it feel less frightening as a change. It's a way of solving a challenge that can't be solved always with the model we're currently using.
It's a softer approach, isn't it?
In my experience, I have never found that you can sell a retainer. You can't make somebody buy a retained project. I haven't ever found that you can push this on to people. That rather, if you articulate it in such a way and explain it as the solution to some of the challenges that can't be solved on a no-win, no-fee basis, because let's face it, we can only do so much when we're working with no financial commitment, because we have to juggle the risk of that with other things, because we can't put all our eggs in one basket, of course. That instead of it being something that you want them to buy, it's something that they would choose to do to solve the challenge that they're facing. And that's my experience. That's been, well, it's served me very well, and applied not just to single searches, but as I've said, to lots of other solutions, because they start telling you about other problems that they've got. And over the years, I've been quite creative about how to help them with those, and worked for some amazing firms that do just that.
Yeah. So in terms of the business at the moment, what's the setup? How does it all work? You do online virtual training? Do you do face-to-face? Do you do group training? How does it all, what's the setup?
So we do a lot of public stuff. We do a lot of public webinars. We do a lot of, more and more now, face-to-face talks and seminars and events. We don't charge for those. It's just raising awareness of it being possible and giving people a few, as much as we can, kind of help in that session as we can. We do a lot of that. If people want then to learn how to do it and want the support and the materials and the tools, then they can join our training program, which is a video course, and it's broken into really easy to follow step-by-step videos that you can watch at your own pace, or you can follow our schedule over 8 weeks. All of the tools and the materials, from business development templates to terms to proposals, and everything that you need is provided. So everything, so that members build their own toolkit, if you like, or sharpen. A lot of the people that come to us are already experienced in Retain, and they just want to get better. It's not there's no final destination. You just get better and better, and you start to win more interesting projects, and a whole world opens up of things like research projects and mapping and pipelining and succession planning, which I just didn't know existed when I was a contingent recruiter, that they will and do pay you on commencement to carry out. But anyway, so we support with that, and then we have live weekly coaching sessions that everyone has lifetime access to. Pitch coaching, objection handling, and we have 2 general Q&A sessions every week. And people say even just sitting and listening to other people asking questions, and me and the other experts in our community answering, helps vastly on their journey. So
they're great as well, aren't they? So we do the live sessions, and I think getting people involved, allowing that element where everybody's got a voice and they can ask the questions that perhaps they don't want to ask at work, or in fear of asking that daft question, but in a group of like-minded people, they can just be a bit freer in terms of what they ask and what they talk about. What's the plan then? What's the future look like? Have you got big plans for how you're going to take it, where you're going to take the the program and the training?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think I still every day come across people that say to me, I just didn't know that it was possible. I didn't know that I was going to be able to do this. And I'm so glad you've taught me how to do it. It's changed my life. That spurs me on to meet more people who aren't doing it because they think they can't.
Yeah.
And so I thought those people would probably just exist in Manchester or, where I started. And actually, it turns out that they're all over the world.
Yeah.
So the more people we reach, the more people we come across that say, I really want to do this, but I'm worried because I don't know what the terms should look like, or I don't know how to say it to my client, or I don't know what if they ask me this, or what if I get halfway through a project and this happens, all those questions that holds people back when they realize that there's answers to them and the support that. So I think we do more and more in the US now. We're doing more and more in Southeast Asia, and the beauty of the video training is that we can reach those people and that they can join us if they want to. So we'll probably continue to do more of that. We're developing a version 2, which is all of the course just refined and polished now that I'm a bit better with video, and the animations that we use just get better and better all the time, and the tools and the processes all polished and informed with the latest techniques and so on. We're developing a mastery course, which will be like a mastermind for the more advanced members that come through the course in the talent mapping, talent pipelining, insight studies, and so on, and senior executive search. So there's plenty to keep us busy.
Yeah.
Lots to keep us busy.
That's exciting,
though. As long as people want to learn how to do this, and there are people out there that are either struggling or worried about it on their own, then we'll keep doing it.
Yeah, good stuff. And if people are listening to this and they want to come and find you and have a chat with you, or have a look at some of the introductory videos, where's the best place to come and find you?
LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn. We live on LinkedIn, all of us, don't we? I'm always putting stuff out there. YouTube, we have a YouTube channel where we release new tips and helpful hints every week. That's Retrained Search. And our website has got loads of information on the course, and how to book a call in my diary. So I've got time over the next few days and even into next week. If anybody wants to book any time in to talk, I'd always be really happy to. Love to.
Fantastic. And I always ask this of all the guests that come onto the podcast. If there was one single piece of advice you would leave the listeners with, what would that be? That
it's never too late. That it doesn't matter how much experience you have or how long you've been doing the same thing, or lots of people say to us, who knew? Old dog, new tricks. And they do it, and there's lots of them to tell the tale. So never think that you can't.
I felt like you were talking to me then.
Well, it's common. It is really common. You're not alone in the way that you feel about it. Lots and lots of people feel the same way, but it's never too late. You can learn how to do it, and it's immensely rewarding and enjoyable.
Lou, that's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed speaking to you today. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.